When I read this parable of Luke, it made me think of hope, which is always a good thing to have. Jesus told this parable. There was a fig tree growing in a vineyard. The owner came out looking for fruit on it, but didn't find any. The owner said to the vine dresser, "Look here. For 3 years now, I've come out in search of fruit on this fig tree and have found none. Cut it down. Why should it clutter up the ground?" In reply, the vine dresser said, "Leave it 1 more year while I hoe around it and fertilize it. If it bears fruit next year, fine. If not, then let it be cut down."
What would you do? Let it be or cut it down? In the revival hymns of the mid to late 19th century, this text inspired at least 2 hymn writers. And one is more like a responsive reading, if you will. The first verse goes something like, cut it down, spare not the fruitless tree. In it spreads a harmful shade. It spoils what else were useful ground. No fruit for years on it I found. Cut it down, cut it down." Then the second verse goes, one more year. Oh, spare the fruitless tree. Behold its branches broad and green. Its spreading leaves have hopeful been. Some fruit thereon may yet be seen. 1 more year. Then it goes back to cut it down, and burn the worthless tree. Then 1 more year. For mercy spare the tree. And finally, when we get to the 5th verse, it goes, still it stands. A fair but fruitless tree, the master seeking fruit thereon has come, but grieved at finding none. Now speak to justice, mercy flown, cut it down. And of course, I want to add more verses, sort of going back and forth between cut it down and cut it down. Also, another hymn written in around the same time frame by Mary Bridges Kennedy Slade of Fall River, Massachusetts. Her hymn was called "The Barren Fig Tree," or "In the Vineyard of the Master." And it goes through the same thing: fruit no blossom, only leaves thereon found. Lo, this tree burdens the ground. And then as it continues, each verse ends with the same refrain. If the master to the vineyard comes a-visiting, seeking, looking, asking for God's own, then it makes us more or less the tree. Are we fit for a visit? Is there fruit upon the tree? Will he bid the gardener cut it down? What will you do? The revivalism of the 19th century and the evangelical fervor of the time would often say, cut the tree down and get it over with. Well, I don't know if that's the best idea or not. Really, the decision's ours. Often commentators sometimes think they are also agriculturalists, and all these things seem to write as if they know with certainty about the vineyards and then the trees of biblical times. One says, of course, there would be a fig tree planted in a vineyard. Did you catch that in the scripture reading? Someone has planted a fig tree right next to the grapevines. Well, what kind of garden is this after all? Are we looking for trees or grapes? But many commentators write as if they know everything about fig trees of that period. And some would say the fig tree is planted in the garden so the vines will have somewhere to grow. Fig trees now and as then can grow to be very big trees with very big leaves. And if you were looking for grapes, you'd probably find none of those too, for this tree would have overshadowed it all, and there'd be no fruit to be found from figs or grapes. But the piece in the story is, it's a little bit of a complicated tell. Amy Jill Levine and Ben Worthington, in their commentary on Luke, sort of has this conversation with one another is, well, first of all, did you notice the one who is concerned about the tree and the planter is not the one in charge of the garden or the vineyard, it's the owner. The owner went out and planted a tree, but then the tree doesn't produce anything, just leaves. Thus, cut it down. Could it be that this owner, as Levine and Worthington would suggest, perhaps is a micromanager? Even though there are hired hands to care for the vineyard, the tree, this person goes right out into the garden and does the work for themselves, sort of doing it their way, perhaps regardless of what anyone else tells them. If I want figs, I'll plant a fig tree wherever I would like. Yet, it's a story that grabs us with this sense of, what should we really do here? Is this tree a good thing, or is it a bad thing? Yet, the answer is not as simple. Sometimes we are faced with questions of what should we do? Do we move on and just say, forget it? Or do we stick with it for a little while longer? Sometimes, some of us have tried gardening for ourselves. Some of you, I know, are very productive farmers or would-be farmers or gardeners. Some of us dig holes and hope something will fall in and grow. But when it comes to trees, I have a little bit of experience. Now, I am nowhere close to being a horticulturalist, but we had a tree. It was in our backyard. When we moved there, we were told it was a Rose of Sharon. It was more or less a twig. It stood really close to the back wall of our garage. Each season it would produce a few leaves and then no blooms. It was that. But so we did our homework. We measured the tree height and we read up about how much root space this tree would take, because we were going to move this tree to our front yard, to the corner actually. And so we did all the work and we decided the diameter should be about 3 feet wide. And we should go about 2.5 feet deep. For according to the measurements of this tree, it should be of this certain height. It should have a hole this big. So I spent an entire Saturday afternoon digging. And when we finally got to the bottom of this project, and George had come home from a meeting that he had been at, I said, how do you think we're doing? And I said, well, we'll save the tree for another day. But there was still some time left, so I went to the back and began to dig slightly around the tree. One shovel into the ground, and the entire tree popped out of the ground with a root ball about this big. So suddenly, what do you do if you have a tree with no ground on a big hole? Having dinner plans, we both quickly grabbed shovels and we started backfilling all we had already dug out and planted this twig of a Rose of Sharon. This Rose of Sharon blooms each year. We also learned that some Rose of Sharons are invasive in some states. They're not natives here. And the Rose of Sharons that one should be planting are of the sterile variety. so they will not propagate into your lawn and elsewhere. We didn't know anything about this tree's pedigree, but if we do not keep up with mowing our lawn, we'd have a lawn of rows of sharing trees everywhere. Through storm, through my brutal haircuts, as George calls them sometimes, this tree flourishes. I'm certain it has very deep roots now, because I even pulled at it a few times, and it is sturdy in the ground. But then there's other trees we've planted, which have remained twigs. Perhaps not enough sunlight, but the tree that annoys me the most is probably one of the most beautiful trees in the corner of our back lawn. It has grown so large that the radius, which is on our side of the property line, has become nothing but barren ground. For the shade beneath this tree, no sunlight dare penetrate. And as much seed as we have planted, nothing grows. Another year, I wonder. At this point, it's like, why waste seed? The tree is too big for just one or two people to cut down. We'd have to hire someone to cut down the tree. And we've had trees cut down after storms and different things. And as much as we love those trees, but long for some of those trees to disappear, once they were gone, now we wonder if we get too much lack of privacy. For everyone can see everything in our backyard, and those trees are gone. But we have learned that some things do grow better with sun. We actually moved a box garden we had on the side of the house near where the old fig Rose of Sharon is. We moved over now where it gets more sunlight during the day. It's hard to grow anything when you have a deer population ravaging everything you have, regardless of living in the city of Syracuse and in the university neighborhood. Deer like to make their way into our neighborhood and feast on all that we plant. Whether deer like it or not, they sure enjoy it out of our yard. So the question is, what will you do? But I think the tide may be turning a bit for the tree. For every tree is not a bad tree, and everything in life, tree or person, is never good for nothing. And the theologian and biblical New Testament scholar Amy Jill Levine, and her by Sandy Eisenberg Sasso, has written a book called The Good for Nothing Tree. Once a gardener planted a fig tree, everyone was excited about watching it grow. Its leaves would give shade, the fruit would be sweet to eat. The children could hardly wait to taste the figs. Spring bloomed to summer, summer cooled into fall, fall blew into winter, winter warmed into spring. Why is it taking so long? The children asked. Why are there no figs? Some people wondered, will that fig tree ever grow up? The gardener cautioned, it takes time. Another summer came, another fall, another winter, another spring. There were still no figs. Some people shook their heads. This tree will never account for anything. The tree dropped a tiny leaf. It's good for nothing. 2 more leaves fell, and the tree shivered in the wind. The gardener moaned. The leaves are still so small. There are no sign of figs. This not good at all. It's time to start over with a new tree. The children pleaded, not yet, please. The fig tree just needs more love. Ridiculous, the gardener declared. Trees don't need love. This one just doesn't grow. We should get rid of it. It's not worth waiting any longer. Please give the tree more time, the children begged. Don't give up. We'll take care of it. The gardener said, go ahead, but it won't matter. The fig tree is good for nothing. That's just the way it is with some trees. The children tried anyway. They pulled weeds, they trimmed branches, they added mulch, they watered the tree. Sometimes they got wet too. Loving the fig tree wasn't too hard. It just took time. Summer went by, then fall. Winter came, spring arrived. Some people shook their heads. Look at those silly children. That good-for-nothing tree, it just takes up space. Enough dilly-dallying. It's time to plant a new tree. But the children didn't want another tree. They wanted this one. They didn't care how long it took. They loved the tree. They worked, they watched, they waited. There were still no figs. So the children tried again. They worked, they watched, they waited. Then as spring turned into summer, buds appeared. They were tiny, but if you looked hard enough, you could see them. The children kept watering and weeding and watching and waiting. Before long, the small leaves grew as wide as umbrellas. The children took a deep breath. What does our tree smell like to you? Asked a child. I smell maple syrup. Coconut, one shouted. Vanilla, another suggested. Everyone agreed that figs looked like purple raindrops. Each day, the children rested in the shade of the leaves. They picked the figs, peeled away the wrinkly skin, and ate the sweet, juicy fruit. As summer came to an end, the children sat under the tree with a picnic of homemade fig balls. It took so long to grow, one child sighed. You were right to be patient, the gardener said. That's how it is with some trees. Second child said, it isn't just some trees, it is our tree. It needed us. A third child added, it needed love. The fourth smiled, and it loved us back. We never gave up. They each took a sticky, delicious bite. And the book ends, if you'd like to see it later, is how to make fig balls. So what will you do? Another year or cut it down?